May we learn together in hope and joy. Please be seated. I remember watching a movie, I think it was probably a couple of years ago now, though that is always hard for me to discern. It has a very tangential connection to what I would like to talk about today, so let me talk about it at length, which is good homiletical tactics here. I think it was called Amazing Grace. It was the biopic of Aretha Franklin. Did any of you see that biopic of Aretha Franklin? One, a couple of you, a couple of you, a couple of you. Now I can't lie about what's in it. I'll have to try to, it's just a mistake. If I get it wrong, you can correct me afterwards. But it's the story of Aretha Franklin. We know who Aretha Franklin is. Yes, amazing voice, amazing singer, amazing performer. And it tells the difficult story of her childhood. But what I think is interesting is that Aretha Franklin, for her whole life, was surrounded by women with beautiful voices and an amazing ability to perform. Her mother had an amazing voice. Her sisters had an amazing voice. And when her mother passed away, sadly, during Aretha's childhood, there were other famous singers who came around her, Clara Ward being one of them, to help her as she grew in this ability to perform and to sing. And so when she sort of burst onto the scene, she was doing something that was very familiar to her, because all of the women of her life had been doing it as an example for her from probably as long as she could remember. And there's a very similar dynamic that happens in the story of Moses. Now, there are many reasons that we might think about Moses, many scenes that may come to mind when we think about Moses, but for me, the scene that comes to mind first, probably because of the Ten Commandments, is him confronting Pharaoh. Ramses, let my people go. And then 10 plagues following. Moses standing up against Pharaoh, who had issued this evil decree to throw children into the Nile River. And this, though he was a little afraid to do it at first and needed a bit of a pep talk from God and needed his brother Aaron to come along with him, what he was doing was something that he had seen all of his life. And especially in the story that we hear this morning, we see the women of Moses' early life resisting Pharaoh. And so when it came time for him to do the same, it may or may not have felt natural, but it certainly was in line with courageous women. The stage is set with the ominous verse that there was a king who did not know Joseph. He did not know this people that was in their land. The Hebrews were strangers to him. He didn't know them. He didn't know their customs. He didn't know how they spoke or what they ate or what they did. And so he was, as is so often the case, afraid. What is it about human nature that we are so often afraid of those that we do not know or do not understand, or who we intentionally or unintentionally keep as strangers? And like people have done all throughout human history, when he was afraid of those and he wanted to maintain power, he oppressed them. He stepped on them, he gave them hard labor, and he made their lives bitter. And when that didn't seem to work because they kept multiplying, he issued a decree that we can only look at and describe as evil. To take all of the baby boys who are born to them and to cast them into the Nile River. We in the Episcopal Church pride ourselves on having disagreements about lots of different things, and that's part of the beauty of who we are. But I think we can all get behind the idea that throwing little children into rivers is wrong. And everyone seemingly but Pharaoh knew. Certainly Shiphrah and Puah, two of the many midwives of the Hebrews, knew that it was evil, and they feared God, and so they resisted. And when boys were born, and Pharaoh noticed that the midwives were not fulfilling what he had told them to do, he calls them to him, and they give him what we have to call a ridiculous excuse. Now, I am very aware that there are many people here who have birthed children, and I have not. I have, with fear and trembling, watched it happen a couple of times. But the excuse that they give is that the women, they're vigorous, and they give birth so quickly that we just can't get there in time. Now, Pharaoh probably doesn't know any better, but many, if not most, if not all of you, know this is just an excuse. They are resisting in a subtle way the evil that was being pressed upon them. It happens to us in so many different contexts. It happens in families, it happens in businesses, it happens in cities and states and nations. I won't say particular examples because we're being recorded and spread to the world, but I can think of times in my career where my leaders have told me to do something that wasn't quite right. And I imagine many of you can think of the time. Oh, think of the business. Think of the corporation. Think of the bottom line. If you just, and we won't say it aloud, things will go so much smoother, so much better. And it's hard in those moments to resist. But these women, Shiphrah and Puah, they had the courage to simply say no. Sometimes the most powerful word we can say is no. I would say, for the most part, we should follow the laws of our nation. Yes, I think by and large, the laws of our nation are things that we should follow. But there are some times, and there is room for disagreement, but there are some times where the edicts are such that the only faithful answer, the only right answer is no. So we have the birth of Moses because of the faithfulness of these midwives, born to a woman who is not named in this story but is named elsewhere. Her name is Jochebed. And she notices that the baby is a boy, and she cares for him as every mother would for 3 months until it is impossible to keep him hidden any longer. Those of you that have had children know that children have a hard time being hidden. They like to make themselves known in all kinds of different ways. They make sounds. They wiggle around, those squirmy little suckers. They produce smells that are hard to hide. And so Jochebed reaches a sad and desperate moment. Just imagine what it must have been like for this woman, looking at her 3-month-old child, knowing that there's nothing that's going to change about what this evil Pharaoh has said. There is nothing that I can do to protect him more than to make a basket with as much care as I possibly can and cast him out onto the river in hope and with a prayer that something good might come of it. That is, we have to admit, a long shot. Sometimes the circumstances that we find ourselves in push us to desperate moments in which we have to hatch plans that are not perfect, far from perfect, but we do them in faithfulness and hope. And we should remember that though we are told this story of Moses and his mother, there were countless other children who had parents who were pushed into just as desperate circumstances, who did not have stories that turn out nearly as well as this one. And I think if we look around in our world today, we will see people pushed to desperate circumstances, doing desperate things in hope and with a prayer. Miriam, Moses' sister, follows the basket, hiding in the bulrushes, putting herself at risk, because if she had been found doing this thing, these Egyptians didn't care. You're all going in the river. And we know how it continues. We'll touch on that in a moment. But what I want to highlight for both Miriam and for Jochebed Jochebed is that they are not passive, they are active. I lead a very comfortable life. And because I lead a very comfortable life, I can be passive a lot of the time. I hear about heinous things that are happening. I read about terrible things that are happening, but they're not happening to me. They may be happening to my neighbor. They may be happening to someone down the street or across the country or across the world. But because it isn't hurting me, I can just lean back and be passive about it. And God looks at that and maybe shakes a finger. Don't be passive. Do something. It may not be perfect, but it is something for the sake of those who have no choice but to do something. And the baby floats down the river, and the daughter of Pharaoh finds this child. Notices immediately that it is a Hebrew boy. If you want to know why, we can explain that during coffee hour. And she has a choice to make. Now imagine that you are Pharaoh's daughter. Your father has issued a decree that all of these evil, subhuman Hebrew babies need to be thrown in the river. And everyone in your culture, everyone in your family, everyone on your team or your people group has said, yes, those evil Hebrews, we have to do something about their infestation in our pure land. She heard all of these things. She felt all of those pressures. She knew that the Egyptian thing to do would be to take this child and toss him in the river. And all around would cheer her and say, see, Pharaoh's daughter, she gets it, just like our Pharaoh does. But she doesn't. In just a couple of weeks, we are going to be inundated by the return of college football. You're going to know it because you're going to hear about it from me over and over and over again, and about my beloved Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, there are some rules that come with being a fan of the Ohio State University, and one of them is that you have to have certain feelings towards that team up north. We won't mention their name. That's one of the rules. And you must despise them with all of your being. It's just part of being on the team. And if you were to stand up during some Ohio State pep rally and hold up a maize-colored M, do you know what they would do to you? Out you go. You want to be one of us? You gotta hate all of them. And it doesn't just happen in football. It happens in so many different places. It happened to Pharaoh's daughter, and she has the courage, and she has the character to say, no, I will care for this child. I will stand up against what all of my people are saying. Surely not all, but all of the loud voices are saying. And I will do what is right. May we have the same courage and character as Shiphrah and Puah and Jochebed and Miriam and this imperial. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.